further ado then, it's a sports debate, which should be excellent. I'm very excited. The motion in this House is the fan of the club supports the takeover by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. Now I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to begin the debate. Just on timing, everyone please time yourselves. I'll try and make hand gestures at the appropriate times, but we'll see how we go. Take it away, Prime Minister.
Hello, am I audible? Sorry, just 1 second. All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Anyone who knows anything about football knows the club in question is Newcastle. And I'd just like to point out as just a point of note that Manchester City suffered the exact same problem insofar as lack of funds. They were bought by Saudi Emirati, and the access of funds ensured that they got better players, better managers, lots of better success, all of which was beneficial for fans in 2 ways. One, they got to see their team that they care a lot about being more successful and getting more utility out of it. But secondly, due to that success and increasing fan base, they got to access to cheaper tickets and cheaper merchandise. First thing I'm going to talk about, what does the problem look like in its current state? Now, actually, the current owner right now is universally hated by Newcastle fans. You can see this in terms of how they've shat on him on social media, how they've even protested against him and hate him a lot insofar as that guy has been responsible for the general downturn of Newcastle in them being relegated even twice. Now, what's the problem here? One, even though he's a billionaire himself, he never invests a lot in the club just in terms of, well, you don't have as much money compared to, but also the incentive or just the mentality of investing a lot. So what that means, you don't have as much payment to managers, to players, investment capacity. I'll talk more about that later. Secondly, he also doesn't have a lot of experience. So perhaps at the other side doesn't have lots of experience that's quite symmetric. And so as this guy's not just experienced manager, owner of a football club. But lastly, we have seen trends of hiking up of prices. Why so? Because any owner, even the owner right now, has an incentive to let's say, make money. Insofar as you can't be successful and increase the base of the fans from which you get the money, and you have few fans left, you have to hike up the prices for those few fans. Insofar as that's true, right now you have hiked the prices of, let's say, football stadiums, of tickets or merchandise, which means that the fans are extremely pissed off at him. I would want to know, this is literally what opposition has to defend, because I'm not too sure what other offer or people are lining up to buy Newcastle right now. So this shit person who has a lot of, let's say, like bad faith and bad image by fans is literally what you have to defend as far as fans are literally leading the club. That's the side that opposition looks like. How do we fix it? The first thing I want to talk about, so 2 things here. What incentives do football fans care about insofar as like they are the stakeholders? It's an active debate. So I think they want this team to be more successful, to get more entertainment value from that, and also for things to be cheaper. So first thing, why do they get more successful? And this is pretty damn important. As far as you're a football fan, you watch the game for a particular competitive spirit. You have rivalries. You don't want your team to be relegated. You want them to play higher up leagues. You want them to be successful, and so that you can enjoy matches. No one wants to watch a team that's losing matches all the time, right? So why do we get a more successful Newcastle, and why do we win more matches? So the first thing I think is crucial, that we get better managers on our side of the house. Why so? What do managers really want? They want 2 things insofar as. One, they want to be successful, they want to win, stuff of that sort. But largely, they want like lots of money in terms of most managers go for large amounts of salaries, because notice other clubs are way more rich than you are. So even if you can't pay them, lots of other people that are competing in the market can. So they have that option of lots of more money to make, because money is really useful for them in terms of what they can spend, but money is also a symbol of how important they are. That's how people in the capitalist world use to measure their worth. So it's kind of important. The second thing they want to do is have their own strategic idea and the strategic training plans. This is drastically different across managers, which is why whenever a new manager comes, you need drastic changes to the infrastructure and the way the facilities you have. That means you don't need a lot of money for that sort of investment in the first place. But I think the managers are really, really crucial. Insofar as you have useful and good managers, they do everything regarding to the team, including hiring your coaching staff, including design tactics, substitutions, team dynamics, all of those sorts of things. You have a better manager, these can literally turn teams around, which is why the Saudi boys would have an incentive to actually hire those managers. But now they have the money to actually do so in the first place. Why is that? Because you have that money for the extra investment cost to actually pay the managers more and actually give them market competitive salaries, which Newcastle currently does not, given that other clubs are too rich and just pick up all of these managers. So you get better managers on our side, and I've already told you why better managers lead to, like, say, coaching and stuff of that sort, and ensure that you have a much better team there. The second thing you get is you have lots of better players. Again, there are some players that are better, like just talent-wise, or the amount of training or the experience they have, far better than others. And in football, better players or a bunch of better players can drastically change the dynamics. There are only 11 players that play. At the end of it, one good attacker can make a lot of difference. Insofar as that's true, what do players swing on? Sure, there are lots of factors. We don't change all of them. But one large factor is, again, money. Because, again, purchasing power, but also the amount of value, right? You don't want to sign on to a club that's paying you less because that's seen as a demotion. A club that's paying you much more is seen as a promotion, even in terms of their rep, their status, and the self-worth they associate with themselves. That's why Manchester City were able to sign up lots of new players insofar as they had more money to make that investment in the first place. Insofar as you have more money, you can sign up these new players. And because of all of those reasons, that's going to mean that you have much better players playing for you and much more likely to be successful. Before I talk about infrastructure, I'm willing to take a few eyes in closing if they have one. All right, just let me know then. So regarding infrastructure, why infrastructure really, really crucial? You need infrastructure and really like nice technologies and machines for training. You also need to hire the best of the best and healthcare experts and so on to ensure your players don't get injured. They can actually play those 90 minutes. They can play recurrent games in an extremely high pressure, high intensity season. But the last thing you need data analysts. And this is something that even I didn't know until Iqbal told me. But the point is lots of football, unknowing to the average eyes, actually depends a lot on data, on strategy, to analyze what teams use which strategy, which player to actually hire, which player to look at. All of these things are extremely specialized fields, by the way, and cost lots of money in terms of computing power, but also hiring the best of the best insofar as there are lots of other people competing for them. All of this means that while this investment, I've showed you why it's worthwhile, but you need the initial money to take investment in the first place. If anyone has a PO, I'll take them. Closing preferably, but otherwise opening. All right. Okay, good to go then. So I've shown to you that you will be much more successful insofar as you actually win lots more games. I think that's a direct benefit. Insofar as you're winning games, that means your fans are a lot happier. That means they're going to celebrate more. They feel more value and actually ensuring that they stick by you and they don't feel like shit in competitive rivalry with their friends and so on. But also you get to play higher leagues and you don't get relegated. So you get to enjoy and watching more games and better games than that far. I think that also means that the second benefit of cheapness also stands. Why so? First, right off the bat, insofar as you have more money, you can actually take the hit to like not hike up prices that much to actually increase the fan base and give them cheap fans and maybe have a normalized price later on. So that's the first thing. But just in terms of the fact that you're playing better, that means you can get more fans insofar as fans that are attracted to those clubs that are rising up the ranks, that are the underdogs that are now coming up and winning all these leagues or actually doing well in them. Insofar as that's true, fans not only in the UK but all across the world are likely to flock to you even more. Old fans who left you, new fans who are excited about your potential. What that means insofar as there's more viewership, you're likely to get sponsors. That means you don't have to charge the fans that much in stadiums because you're getting money from other mechanisms so you have more fans. You have more fans, that means there is more demand for your merchandise. And insofar as that's true, you can spread costs across a lot of fans. Your stadiums are full and that's why you don't have to charge more per price. So you get cheaper fan tickets, but more on this in Iqbal's speech. For all of these reasons, so proud to close.
Thank you very much for that speech. We'll now have opening position up to begin the case off bench. Here.
Hey, sorry, just give me a sec to get my timer up. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about two things, fairly straightforward things. First thing I'm going to talk about is what the fans care about. Second thing I want to talk about is what the SAPIF, the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, care about, why those things are radically at odds, and why, because of that, as a fan, you shouldn't support this. So firstly, let's talk about what fans care about. First observation I have is that this motion is not about fans which Newcastle, well, this unnamed club, used to have when it was successful. Neither is this motion about fans which the club could gain in the future became successful. It is about the core group of fans who, despite this club's fall from glory, still sticks with it through thick and thin. What that suggests to us is that these fans are not engaged in like a crudely, emotionally transactional relationship with the club, right? Because there's a kind of fan who thinks, I'm a fan of a club so that I can get pleasure if the club wins, right? It's almost like an investment model. I invest my emotions and you give me happiness. We suggest the fans who remain with this club are not that kind of fan. Rather, they're probably fans who think that club forms a critical part of who they are as people in a particular region of the world from which that club comes. So if we're talking about Newcastle, you're really talking in this debate about people who have deep links to the Northeast, people who live in Newcastle and who care a lot about that identity. And I can note, this is not just true of Newcastle, but just of football clubs generally, especially those which have strong regional links or like go through difficult periods, right? So how do we think this regional identity manifests itself in terms of the priorities of these fans? Firstly, they think it's critically important to them that the club contains at least some core group of players, not completely, who are from that region and who represent them. The reason that is important is because you are not a fan of that club because it contains professionals who do well, but because these are people who are in some sense like you, who might have walked the same streets you did, right? And in a very large part, it's linked to regional identity because they're generational links as well, right? So people are fans of Newcastle because their parents watched it when they were young, because they got brought to a game and got hooked on the beautiful game, because their grandparents talked about it over dinner. Because if you were from a struggling household, it might actually be one of the few ways in which you gain pleasure in a way where it was difficult to get access to other kinds of entertainment. So that's the first thing we think they care about. The second thing we think these fans care about, not all of them, but a disproportionate number of them care about, is regional development. I.e., a club which actually plows money back into ensuring that people in that region just generally live better lives and specifically access to football. So if we keep with this Newcastle stuff, right? So Newcastle owns a Newcastle United Foundation, which specifically is about giving underprivileged kids in the northeastern region a better education. It funds a huge number of after-school football programs, which, by the way, are critical for low-income families because just having a structured regime where you are disciplined, where someone's taking care of you, and your parents are working multiple jobs is actually critically important to these local communities as well, right? Similarly, Newcastle also has a youth wing and a women's wing. They don't get very much attention, but again, Newcastle fans really care about these things, and we think these are general characteristics structurally of people who tend to stick with clubs that are not doing particularly well. So why do we think, therefore, it's not in your interest for you to let this corporation take over? Let's first look at what the SAPIF is. Firstly, it's not even a human being, right? It is an organization owned by the Saudi Arabian government whose explicit mandate is to do nothing but maximize revenue, right? Its technical mandate is to engage in quote-unquote strategic investment on behalf of the Saudi royal family. What that suggests to us, we'll get to in a moment, but the other thing I want to point out, that since this is Saudi Arabia, that it's also likely that in part, this investment is driven because some member of the Saudi royal family thinks of this thing as his or her personal pet project, right? We think this is quite a logical thing to think because the Saudi Arabian royal family, given its absolute hold of power and its obscene wealth, is not exactly known for being that careful about where it invests its money and for engaging in lavish spending projects for their own personal prestige. What does this suggest to us they will do to this club? And I think in large part, this engages directly with what the Prime Minister said. Firstly, we think they're going to be profoundly unconcerned with maintaining a local core of players in that club, or indeed getting rid of whatever identity it has. So the current owner, for instance, Mike Ashley, right, who the Prime Minister mentioned, so it's true, he does not have huge amounts of experience like directly playing football, but he's been involved in the region for a fairly long time. He grew up there for some time. He was quite prominent in the 1990s because he was actually one of the critical whistleblowers to revealing a scandal about price fixing of, I think, shirts which are being sold in the Premier League, right? So these are people with some kind of tie and identity. What we're going to have is that we're going to get rid of these people. We're going to get rid of that core of local players who give that club that identity and who mean so much to the people who are actually fans of this particular club. I'm happy to take, oh, sorry, this is, yeah, take a PR from CG. Yeah.
The bid exists on both sides of the house. Do you think that if the fans stop supporting, is going to stop the purchase, or the purchase will go on either way?
Oh, I'm not particularly sure, but I mean, my intuitive reaction is that this is not the debate about what the outcome is going to be. It's more a debate about what you as fans ought to do given your particular preferences. If it's going to happen either way, then probably we marginally win because we make it marginally less likely that the purchase will go ahead and the current fans get massively disenfranchised. If the fans support it, presumably that's just a lot easier. If fans don't support it, there's a lot of negative press coverage. The Daily Mail might pick it up and say, ooh, look, creepy, nasty Saudi Arabians coming over and stealing our identity. And that kind of thing can actually exert a fair amount of pressure on Saudi Arabia wanting to come in and take over. So, if it's going to go ahead anyway, but rather we make a lot of noise and silently go along and see our club get destroyed for everything we care about. So, firstly, we don't care about foreign, keeping that core of players. But secondly, we think also they stop caring about regional development for the very simple reason that it's not profitable. And this is an organization taking over whose explicit mandate is to maximize profit. Why would you invest in after-school programs for local kids, but none of those kids are ever going to start playing for your league and getting you those monetary returns? In fact, the owners are probably going to calculate that they can do all of these things if they manage to take over. Because once they take over, they can try and gain a new fan base by having the club do better, right? So at the end of the day, we're willing to trade off the success of the club quite explicitly in order for maintaining the identity, because we don't believe we engage in a transactional, emotional relationship with this club. What do we get coming from opening government, which is still left? Well, the first thing we see is well, if you have better managers who perform well, again, we don't think this is what they care about. The only relevance is that they say, well, if you get more sponsorship, ticket prices are lower. Look, if you're a club in one of the top leagues, you will get money anyway, right? Newcastle makes about £200 million a year. Barely breaking a profit, but still enough to keep going as it is. Still enough for those television rights to be shown and for people to want to watch it. Because even if people can't buy tickets, you can still watch these things on TV, right? Even if you ignore the fact there's no point watching it if this club no longer represents who you are, right? So at the end of the day, this is a debate about trade-off between winning and maintaining a certain kind of identity. And we think there'll still be bias at the end of the day because if you're a club in the top leagues, there'll be lots of rich people with pet projects who want to take over. But a large number of them will be people with links to the region and who are not creepy Saudi Arabian-owned public investment corporations you could go to instead. For all these reasons, we're very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now welcome back to Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for opening government. Here.
Yeah, just check. Am I audible? In this transfer window, Chelsea bought Tim Werner and Hakim Ziyech. They might buy Kai Havertz in the future. Manchester City bought Ferran Torres. Liverpool bought left back Tsimikas and might be in the market for Thiago. Manchester United, well, Manchester United is shit. Nobody needs to talk about Manchester United. Newcastle United, on the other hand, bought this guy called Mark Gillespie from Motherwell FC, and this is going to be their third choice goalkeeper for the upcoming season. And that is the problem that Newcastle fans face. Because before everything, like even before regional development, even before things like investing in the women's team or whatnot, fans prioritize success. Because your city is going to be identified as a loser or a winner in Britain, depending on whether your club wins matches. Whether your club or your city gets rights over Manchester or Liverpool, it is what fans ultimately care about. So I'm going to challenge this guy about other stuff because I presume that lots of neutral actors who probably care about regional development care much more about the things that O talked about, but not necessarily fans. But I'm also going to engage there. The first thing I want to engage on is then regional development. And I think over here, side opening opposition completely misses the comparative. Because one of the reasons why this core group of fans has been protesting against Mike Ashley for the past 2 years is because of stripping. Now, if you notice, towards the end of LO, they also talked about, the fact that 200 million was generated and there isn't a lot of profit being gained out of it. That's the exact reason why asset stripping is happening. If you don't have profit, you don't invest in these sorts of local players and local facilities. So what has Mike Ashley done? Mike Ashley has ensured that the Newcastle Academy, which used to be one of the best academies in the world, is now an academy which does not produce players at all. Over the past 10 years, only 3 to 4 players have been homegrown players who have come up from the academy. So I think just in terms of academy, I'm not sure why Mike Ashley develops this academy much better, given that Mike Ashley does not want to invest in the academy to begin with. But the second thing I want to point out, for the reason for why the Saudis will go berserk and people from the city will still end up playing, is because of 2 things. One, the Premier League has this rule that you need at least a certain number of homegrown players for you to actually be able to buy foreign players. The reason why Tottenham, for instance, just bought Joe Hart is because they need a new slot to buy a foreign player who they could not have bought before. So there is still an incentive for them to build local players and better players. The second thing I want to note is that there are financial fair play regulations that FIFA and UEFA do enforce. That's why Manchester City, for instance, was hit with them in the past, which means that you can't just go up spending millions and millions of money on players. You must actually develop your academies as well. It's a side-by-side process. But yes, money still gives you an advantage. So I'm not sure that the facilities or the training facilities will go to shit. I'm actually pretty sure that they will be much better because there's an incentive to get homegrown talent. At the very least, the best homegrown talent. Because even if they don't play for your team, you can actually sell them to other clubs and get transfer fees in the millions. And at the end, the training facilities that you create will be used by youth players, but they will also be used by your players. And you presumably need good facilities for your players as well. So I just think in terms of team development, that's there. The second bit about investing in youth, women's leagues, foundation, etc. I would note that one, there is no comparative reason for why Mike Ashley, as a billionaire, cares more about this sort of regional development than the Saudis do. Like, just because this is an organization and that is a person, I'm not sure why this is something that's done better on their end. But I would note the second thing. One of the major criticisms of the Saudi takeover has been the fact that there are immense human rights abuses being conducted in Saudi Arabia or being conducted by Saudi Arabia and the international community. If anything, Saudi Arabia has an incentive to pour more money into this foundation so it is able to whitewash its image and is able to placate like lots of the kind of criticism that have come its way. The reason why this is important is because the kinds of impacts that opening opposition wants, such as getting more money into the foundation so that school kids can play football or whatever, is much better channeled on our side of the house. The second thing I would note is the only point at which you increase funding for foundations or non-profitable things is if you have greater revenue to begin with. Mike Ashley is not running greater revenue, therefore his ability to invest in the foundation is lower. The second thing that I would also note is that the foundation isn't entirely run on money that ownership gives. The foundation largely is also run on lots of donations that players give or fans give or people from around the world give. So I'm not sure why this is something that wins them the debate. Now, coming back to the major focus of this debate, which is why do we get more success on our side of the house and why does that also translate into cheaper tickets and so on and so forth. Now, notice Newcastle is barely breaking a profit right now, and you need to ask yourself, what is the reason that Newcastle isn't making lots of profits? I think the first thing you need to note is Newcastle has been unable to expand its fan base. Therefore, lots of people who are fans of Newcastle come from Newcastle. There is no Pakistani fan for Newcastle like there's a Liverpool fan in Pakistan or Liverpool. Like Manchester United, for instance, has a global fan base. The reason why this is important is if you have more people who are buying into, say, your merchandise or say sponsors are more attracted by you having a larger fan base. The reason why this is important is if you have more profits coming from more sources, you don't need to extract the revenue you absolutely need from a limited number of people. That is why you don't rip off Newcastle fans who come to the stadium to buy a ticket, which is extremely expensive. You are able to subsidize a lot of these costs and are able to give people access to the club. Before moving on, anything from closing? Nothing. I go towards success then. Why do we get better success and why is that important? Because note, for you to be able to build a global fan base, you will need a better, I'm sorry, out of time. You will need a better manager because that manager will be able to attract better players, buy better players, make better tactics, and therefore be able to, fend off Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, everybody. I think that's the first thing. And then you also get the ability to pay managers better. But the second thing is you get players better. And I think this part of Ahsan's analysis has not been tackled at all, right? Players are concerned with two things. One, they want to win trophies. They don't want to lose their career. They only have 10 years. They want to win something as opposed to being in a team which is mid-table or at least has been relegated in the past few years to a lower championship level, right? So you get better players on our side of the house. Therefore, your ability to win crucial matches is much better. But lastly, you get better infrastructure on our side of the house. For you to be able to get the best tactics, the best football, you need the best training pitch, you need the best physicians, you need the best facilities for your players, but you also need the best data analytics team. Currently, because of so much competition in the football market, lots of these sorts of people and personnel are going towards other clubs. You need to be able to attract them to, one, make other clubs weaker, but your club stronger. And all of this matters because success gets you revenues, success makes the fans happy, and more fans means cheaper costs in the future. And also, by the way, means more funding for the foundation. It means it also means more funding for people who come from.
Thank you very much for that speech. Full disclosure, you cut out there at the end, but it was already at 7:20, so we couldn't listen anyway. If you can just give me one moment before we call up the next speaker, I just need to go and get my laptop charger. I'm about to run out of battery. Be back in one moment. All right, we're all plugged in. So let's now have the deputy opposition leader up to conclude the top half. Here.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi. Let me just find my timer. So I just want to start by saying that a bulk of the analysis that deals primarily with this Mike Ashley fella is actually irrelevant to this debate, to the extent to which the motion doesn't specify a particular team that this debate is about, but rather calls upon us to talk about why exactly, as a team within a particular league that does sports, for instance, when faced with a choice about whether or not, as fans, we ought to support the notion of Saudi Arabia specifically using its investment fund to buy over our club that we care about deeply, whether we should support it or not. To that end, I think there's a very simple question we just need to ask in this debate. Whether or not we think Saudi Arabia is more likely to be attenuated to the goals that the fans of the club are likely to have versus our own local owners and our own regional ownership of that particular club. Let's talk about the club and its fans first and what they care about. So what opening government tells us is that fans care primarily about winning and seeing their club play more games and doing very well. The first thing to note about this is that even if all of the analysis is true, which I don't think it is, the point of the matter is it really questions whether or not allegiances to a club come about from just the ability of that club that just happens to hold the name of your city or hold the name of the club that you used to support winning a league or a tournament, or whether it matters that that club actually represents the values of what it is that you originally supported. So for instance, Arsenal, well, not Arsenal any longer, but like Manchester United, etc., are all clubs that have global fan bases. And these global fans presumably only give a shit about whether or not they win because they have no personal allegiances to these clubs. But if you look at how, for example, Leicester City was able to pull off an unlikely victory at the end of the day, those are the kinds of wins that matter significantly more to the individuals who exist in Leicester, which was why the streets were flooded with people who were celebrating at the end of the day because they didn't rely upon money, but rather actually cared about the successes of those teams as well. Which means that a lot of the analysis in the OG also premises itself upon the fact that there is no ability whatsoever for these clubs to ever gain success, which we think is just false. But secondly, what exactly do fans really care about? I would argue that, as we said earlier, fans don't just care about winning, but secondarily, I think what's more important to fans right now is that often these clubs represent, especially in more poverty-stricken areas, which is presumably the reason that OG rests upon as to why these clubs are not doing particularly well. They care significantly about how that club is a necessary and inherent part of their regional identity of the city or like the place that they are from, which therefore suggests that to these people, the idea that you can dilute their stakes and holdings in this particular club, for instance, and allow for someone else to take over in order for them to make decisions and therefore take away investment from your region is something that's significantly worse off for these fans than the counterfactual. Why is that likely to be the case? Let's first deal with the notion of enjoying the sport, because they tell us that with more money we can get cheaper tickets, we can get like better merch or whatever. The point of the matter is, however, that's actually wrong in the sense that when you have a bigger fan base that are more global, you also attract like more money into that particular sport, which is the reason why, for example, merch for like very popular clubs are sky high because of increased demand around the world, which therefore means that if you're a local fan that's cared about the sport for a very long time, you actually then become priced out of being able to afford tickets to your local games. You then become priced out of being able to support your local merch as well. So I think the analysis is backwards. But secondly, what exactly are the incentives of Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis a local owner? They say to us, Saudi Arabia is now embroiled in human rights abuses. Therefore, these human rights abusers are going to make them much nicer. Like, first of all, like just intuitively, in what world has Saudi Arabia ever acted that way? But secondly, presumably, we suggest that there's also like not a great thing to have when it comes to like Saudi investment funds and allowing for them to use your sporting club as a means of diverting attention away from their human rights abusers. As a fan of the sport, which is characterized to you is often a fan that comes in the region as being a lifelong diehard fan for whom this has significant sentimental value too, you don't really want your football club to become a plaything that allows for the Saudi Arabian investment fund to be able to use it to disguise itself from the human rights abusers of like MBS, for instance. So I think all of those things make no sense whatsoever. The third thing then is this argument that that they argue about how we are going to be able to win or like be able to stay on in the league. The first thing to note is that I don't think that we're working in a situation of zero alternatives, in the sense that even if the PIF is the best possible alternative at the moment, this doesn't mean that the club has no other ability to garner sources of funding. So first of all, you still have television castings, etc., merchandise. There's still a local base level of support of individuals, for instance. But also, we suggest that there are other buyers that care presumably about the regional aspect and quality of your club. They are also lining up to invest money, perhaps not as much as the Saudi Arabian PIF might, but invest like via quantum and numbers, money that is able to keep your club growing and continue to feed back into the kind of regional developments and infrastructure that is necessary for you. We think that it's better that this money goes towards your own community development as opposed to a Saudi Arabian investment fund that is far more likely to buy the big players, for instance, but also at the same time not cut off all of the losses that they would otherwise have by having to develop their own regional area. And that's important because regardless of what the OG says, the comparative is quite clear in this debate, in that the comparative means that there is less likelihood that a person that comes from your club that is amenable to the pressures of your own local fan base and your own local individuals, for instance, is going to donate less to these regional developments and schools, etc., than the Saudi Arabian PIF itself. Okay, I'll take one from CG. If none, then OG. Anyone? No?
All right, so your analysis ignores the extremely competitive nature of football due to a variety of reasons. Thus, fans care a lot about winning because that's linked to their culture, pride of their local town, and all of those sorts of things. This is why you have strong football rivalries.
Yeah, you have strong football rivalries because I see the club as a part of my identity. At the point at which like that club is now owned by Saudi Arabia, like that, what reason is there for me to care about their identity, even though we both come from the same region of England? Like, it doesn't matter any longer to me, right? But also this presumption that fans only care about winning presumably talks about a global fan base that has no allegiances to the region that club is from. In a club that hasn't been doing very well historically, those fans don't exist. We don't really care about them. Next thing then, what exactly can fans assert in response to this idea of like Saudi Arabia coming in? First of all, many fans currently, especially when you have a small fan base, actually have stakes in that club, which means that they are able to pressure their owners, for example, to not allow for the investment to come in. So we think that's one strong mechanism as to why we can block this particular deal from happening. In the counterfactual, you dilute your stake and ability to control what the club does. We think that's significantly worse. But secondly, to the extent to which you have those strong regional allegiances to that club, we think that you have a disproportionate ability to garner media attention and coverage over this particular situation that is then able to wash out any possible buyover of this club. At the end of the day, this is what is important. Sporting clubs are incredibly important to people when they are the only thing that these people have. It's important that we recognize that even if they're not doing well, it's important that we have to keep their regional character as opposed to putting our hopes on Saudi Arabia to do it for us. We're very happy to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and thank you everyone on the top half. We now move on to the closing half and welcome the government member here.
Can you hear me? Okay. 3 things in extension. First of all, what are the Saudi interests? Why we think that this is actually in line with the interests of the fans. Secondly, why we don't think that the identity of the team is going to change to an extent that it's going to harm the fans. And thirdly, why actually being in opposition as the fans is something that is going to harm them much more in the day after. So even if you don't accept that things are going to get better, things are going to get worse once they show that they are against this, and this move would happen. So let's start with the interest of the Saudis. So first of all, notice that Leicester is actually quite a great example for our side because they have a very rich owner that is the owner of a duty-free in Thailand. And he didn't change the team a lot because he knew that there is a process. They started really from the bottom. So what he did is give money, and he told professionals to do what they did. And here the professionals said, okay, we have good talent. We still don't have enough credit in order to get people from Real Madrid because they are also owned by Qataris and also very other rich people. And then they became a wonderful team. So we don't think that we're getting this contrast that they are talking about. Secondly, they assume that in status quo, the fans are the owners, which doesn't exist in all teams except for one, which is Barcelona, which is not the team that we're talking about. So it's not as if the current fans have such a huge ability to change the club dramatically, and then they're not being comparative to the actual owners that we're talking about that might have also diverse incentives, because notice that the bulk of their analysis is they want to make money. Notice that anyone who buys a team wants to make money out of the team. The only question is then, are the Saudis better than them? And this is what we're going to show. And why is that? So we say that the reasons that the Saudis are buying those teams is not necessarily to make an immediate profit. Because as we heard from already Ashish, they do lavish purchasing, right? This means that besides making a profit, which they could have by buying oil companies and real estate and so on, or other things in the West, they want the lavish. They want to be seen as, this is a kind of new horse trading, but now you have people running after a ball instead of a fancy horse that you buy. They want the luxury of being able to say, we have a wonderful team. Now notice here that they are also going against the Qataris and the Emirates, which are the regional enemies, meaning that they want to have a wonderful team that is going to do well and is going to be unique, not just any other team owned by the Arabs, by the Western perception. They want it to be something that everyone is going to talk about. Now, notice here that this means that they want the team to do really well. But notice that this actually means doing things like developing the youth. Why? Because this is the kind of thing that allows you to have very cheap players that go straight into your club that you don't need to purchase from the outside or depend on anyone else. Or you can sell them at a very high cost. That's why clubs like Ajax are doing so well and have a large youth base. Moreover, we say that because on the one hand they want to be lavish and successful, but on the other they are seen as the foreigners, there are also a lot of pressures on them coming from the management that they're going to hire to do the best. Other players that are also local that want the club to actually meet those values, and also the fans. And notice here that the Saudis don't want to be constantly booed and don't want to be seen as the meanies that are now doing other bad things, not only in Yemen, but also in football, meaning that they want to actually whitewash them, to actually be seen as doing the best on all fronts. So this means both the money and the investment in the team, and not doing things that contradict what the original fans want. But then, why do we think that this also means maintaining the identity? So first of all, notice that we get this weak characterization coming from up saying, if you have fans from all over the world, you change your nature. Why? That seems weird, that a lot of people from everywhere are going to come to this one team, to Newcastle. There are so many teams that are winning, that are doing even better than this team that is, let's be realistic, not going to win for at least 5 more years until things dramatically change in the infrastructure of the club. So why leave Real Madrid? Why leave Barcelona? Why leave other teams? I don't understand. It seems to me like people are going to like this team if they are kids watching it for the first time, and if they are friends of the local base. Now, moreover than that, even if there is a new fans, you still have the identity, because sport is all about narrative, and narratives don't change because they are based on your rivals and on your region and on your position. So if you are the proletariat team, notice that this is not going to change because you have money, because you still have the team of the more posh people within London, and they're not going to say to you, now you have a fancier accent. No, they're still going to look down at you and to say, you are the team of the proletariat, meaning that these things still exist and the nature is preserved by the fact that other people view this narrative of you. Moreover, you sit there with other people liking you. So for example, in Paris Saint-Germain, there's a lot of money, and yet the fans are local, and you have Jews and you have people that are immigrants, and all of them are sitting together, and this didn't change because the ethos is, this is my team, this is my identity. And notice that no one leaves the team even when things are going poorly. So why would they leave the team if the owner is someone that they don't like? They are seen as wussies, and this goes even against their machoism. Before I continue,
Yeah, so maybe Saudi Arabia will pretend to do all these nice socially responsible things to get ownership, but once it has ownership and can legally do whatever it wants, what incentive does it have if it's just waging proxy war against other Arab states to actually develop the region?
So Ashish, I analyzed that a ton. I think Ido would answer more. But notice that if then the fans are in opposition, there's still going to be the purchase, because exactly like OO says, the Saudi Arabians manipulate the media and they get more coverage. And if they want that team and that is the team for sale, that they're going to buy it. But then this means that the fans are seen as a problem. The fans are seen as something that the owners don't really want, exactly because of what we analyzed. And this means that they would much go against them. They would change the price of tickets in order to block them out. They would paint them as hooligans in the media. They would make sure that that they don't get the privileges that they do. And we think they would buy players that go against their identity and not just people not from their identity. And this is going to be way worse for the fans because they would lose everything. So for all of those reasons, we call you to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. We'll now have the opposition member up to begin the CO case. Here.
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, POI in the chat around 5:45 or something. Cool. All gives you some reasons why this, this football club is very important to your identity. Where they miss the point is how intense it actually is in terms of that your beliefs and values you hold about yourself, and when something is a part of your identity, this is something that you ascribe to a club, especially if you're a hardcore fan in this sort of situation, which means that you look at a club as a moral actor, as somebody who's representing your own sense of self and your own beliefs and core values. This is important because this is usually and crucially connected with, first of all, your local identity, how you feel about where you grew up, your city, your town. Second of all, political identity, beliefs that you hold, that your family holds, and that your club stands for. Third of all, generational heritage. What would your father think of this, or what would your grandfather and fathers before them think of this move, in a sense? And this is a baggage that you have when you're making a decision whether this is something good internally or not. But also, you're not necessarily choosing who you root for. This is quite like religion in terms of something that is being indoctrinated by generational thing, by you wanting to hang out with your father and watch the football game and connect and bond in this sort of situation. This is important on a bit of a different level also from opening a position. It's important because you want your identity to be affirmed by yourself, but you also want others to acknowledge your identity as something that is positive, as something that is good. This is going to be lost here, and this is going to be our extension. Why other fans who you actually value opinion of are going to be horrible towards you, and this is going to diminish any success that you can have in this sort of situation. Let's talk about framing necessarily, because we will take governments at their best. Like I will mitigate it, but like even in our case works, even if you start to win, right? Your happiness and perception of success is always based on expectation and relative term. So insofar that you, even if you have a small win against somebody, if you expected your team to be the last on the table, this is something that brings you happiness as a team. Even if you're going 0-0 versus a favorite, this is this underdog story, right? In this situation, you feel much better. If the expectations rise, if you at least have more money, and like that you compromise your values, fine, but like we will win against this. Every loss that you now are going to perceive is going to be much higher in this situation. And even Monica concedes to some extent that this club is not necessarily immediately going to become successful, but let me give you structural reasons for this, right? Team cohesion. You cannot just buy 11 new players, 25, however much you want, and then they will magically fit together and do all of these things. So even throwing money at the problem is not necessarily solving the problem. Manchester City, for 10 years of Arab money that is coming into them, they won 2 titles in total, and they lost majority of the situations, majority of other, very important things. The problem is also failures. Like you can decide on a bad transfer. Somebody was good one season and then they were good, bad on the other season. But also, this is not even the largest amount of investment the club has gotten. Real Madrid, Manchester City, Barcelona, will have even much more money than this. So even insofar that money is at stake, the comparative is still, how do you say, the other clubs also have a larger shit ton of money that you're also competing with. So the success is not guaranteed, but the expectation is raised. And this is a crucial problem, because now that you, how do you say, have this expectation of money being something that will bring you success, every loss hurts 10 times more, because this is an embarrassment. You sold out, you sold yourself, and you sold yourself for nothing because you didn't win that title. So even insofar that you win sometimes, the dwelling on losses is something that is going to be much more crucial. Let's talk about the most important thing. This is the perception, right? Usually the fans and football fans are usually having like a very internal community between themselves, different people rooting for different things. You're necessarily distincting yourself against the other fans in terms of their identity, their political beliefs, how their club is conducting them. We're the club about this. And the important thing is that this identity is already formed. You're necessarily changing this identity, or this is perceived. It's very important for other clubs and how other clubs and other clubs fans are perceiving your club to begin with, right? Currently in the status quo, they're perceiving you as somebody who has like a very honorable old heritage. Like they will remember, look at the old gold days, that's club not to mess with in the association. With this, the perception and the thing that will happen, especially intentions, why does this incentive exist, right? Like when you're at the stadium, when your club and your other club's identity is also threatened, you have the urge to attack, to banter. Banter is the most important thing, chanting on stadiums, even escalating it to fighting and huge problems that existed in this association, because, how do you say, this is a huge part of the identity. Being perceived as selling out in the association towards this is something that is very horrible. Like, look at Manchester City. Manchester City's nickname now is Arab Money Club in the association. This is not something that will bring you pride. This is something that brings you shame. And this is something that other clubs fans are necessarily going to exploit in the narrative, because they know it pisses you off. But notice that Saudi money is even more pernicious, even more than Emirates, right? Saudi Arabia has been declining over the years in terms of their popularity, in terms of how people are scrutinizing them. Notice the Khashoggi incident and how it shook the world when they literally butchered the fucking journalists. This is what you're associated with. So, like, oppressing women, Yemen, bombing all of these people and starving children, fossil fuel industry in terms of climate change. All of these things mean that, like, when the Neon project that is now trying to sponsor many leagues in the world, tennis, League of Legends, majority of these clubs usually ends up by fans huge backlash, and then them having to pull this how do you say, sponsorship for that reason. This is what happened with League of Legends, when the fans were just pissed that your league is associated with something like this. This is likely to happen on this side of the house, especially because other teams have the incentive to how do you say, do this. But it's also taking pictures, right? MBS being at the stadium, taking pictures with your players, all these things, having Saudi Arabia flags, all of these things is deeply hurtful to your zero case. Opening government. Please fast.
Yeah, the investing firm does not have an incentive to change the identity of the club, because they can lead to backlash from the original fans, which are the most vocal ones.
Sorry, but it's going to be perceived that you change the identity, that you're associated with this. This is not necessarily they're going to change the name and the flag. It doesn't have to be that bad. It's just that the other teams have the incentive to push you for it. But also, even insofar, look, when you win in this sort of situation, people don't see this win as something that is dramatic and is very cool. When you have somebody who wins against all odds, you respect them for it and all of these things. If you win with like huge money, nobody respects it. Even in football community, they're just saying, you only won because you had this money. This is why most of these clubs are usually seen as villains, right? They're poaching other players. Notice this also. They're poaching players from your club and bringing them into your own club with Arab money. This brings even more antagonism towards them under their side of the house, which means that even if insofar that you succeed, nobody acknowledges that success. Nobody says, bravo, you're the best club. They actually say, yeah, you only succeeded because you sold out towards this money. So even your winnings in this association are much, much worse on their side of the house. So they perceive you as the enemy. This is the most important comparison, because it doesn't have to do with any incentives. It just has to do with the formed identity and how important it is towards these people and that interaction in the group where they're most likely to care about. This is why you should vote closing opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Rush, for that speech. We'll now have the Gov Whip up to conclude the Gov bench. Here.
One second. This is, after all, a nations tournament. And what says a nations tournament more than a Shutterstock image? Can you hear me? Great. So 1 second. 3, 2, 1, go. We think that a lot of what CO says is actually based on the premise that the identity of the club is being hurt by this motion. This is at best very reliant on OO's case to why this identity is actually changing, which CO didn't do a lot to extend on, but at worst and actually in reality, just embarrassing, because Milos can't do that when he doesn't respond to Monica's analysis on why actually the identity is going to be preserved, and the identity is going to be actually preserved in a much better way than the alternative, and therefore all of those things that comes from the identity changing are actually not happening. I'm going to talk about two main things in my speech. First of all, what are the likely things that Saudi Arabia are going to do and how it interacts with the interests of the fans of the club? And secondly, how specifically supporting or not supporting the buy is going to affect the action, and why do we think that supporting is the right thing to do if you want all of the interests of the club? Before that, a few points of external rebuttal. So first of all, I just want you to notice that CO didn't respond at all to any of our points. This is extremely important because we would love to engage with them, but they didn't engage with us, so we don't know what do they think on our case. They probably agree, which is great. Second of all, they tell us that now the losses are going to be more painful, and therefore it's going to harm all of the fans. First of all, we think that this is kind of in tension with OO. OO claims that winning is not an important thing for most fans. They mostly care about regional development. They mostly care about this being connected to the area, about the historical relations. Therefore, we don't know why losing or winning is very important in CO's mind if OO claims the opposite. Secondly, we think that specifically in the scenario that is talked about in this motion, probably the fans are already used to lose a lot. Probably they are losing most of their games. They are probably going to win more games than before. And therefore, when they look at the league as a whole, they're going to feel that last year they were in the 11th place and now they're in the 5th place. Maybe it's not first, but they will think that they are better, which is probably the right scenario. Thirdly on that, we think that probably there are just symbolic things that are going to let them think that the club is going to a better direction. First of all, like probably some people are not going to leave the club because they are being bought by other clubs, which is like a huge demoralizing fact for those people. Secondly, they are going to get like a nicer stadium, a nicer manager, all of those stuff that is going to make them feel better. We don't think that like all of those things are overriding all of those good things. Third of all, they tell us that your identity is now linked to specifically bad stuff like Saudi Arabia, and therefore it's going to create more violence and stuff like that. So first of all, we don't think that your identity is connected to that. We don't see that. We don't think that today all Chelsea fans are being connected to Roman Abramovich or something. We don't think this is what people think when they think about football. Secondly, we don't think that this is comparative. Probably everyone who buys a foot club is a billionaire. Probably every one of them is doing something bad. If it's frauding people, if it's being in oil businesses, if it's all of those stuff that created the crisis in the economy or something like that, we don't think this thing is comparative at all. And it's just like a binary thing. Either you're good or bad in the analysis of CO, so they can't like rebuild it on why specifically Saudi Arabia is more bad, because they've just said that you are going to be linked to bad stuff in general. But thirdly, we think that this also ignores Monica's analysis on why actually there are going to be more violence and more bad interactions when you are specifically doing things against the owners of the club. Because now when Saudi Arabia still is going to be the owner, it's going to take more of your special rights to like buy the best tickets and stuff, which means that probably the fans are going to act more violently and worse doing those things, which is going to make how their view to be seen even worse, which we think is what CO wants to claim is winning, but we don't know how it really the link that wins the debate anyway. Let's move on to our points. What is Saudi Arabia likely to do? So OG gives us a brilliant analysis on why it's going to help the club wins. And making the club wins is the most important thing. Or we've said two things which we think are quite reasonable. First of all, winning is not the most important thing, because for many of those people, there are things that are more important. Otherwise, they would just probably move to be a fan of another club or something like that. And secondly, they completely agree that Saudi Arabia will want to make this club win, which means that all of OG's analysis is at best irrelevant to what the clash in this motion is. But what did OO tell us? First of all, they've told us that it's going to, that those new owners are going to only be about the money, completely ignoring their incentives of the fans, but there is no actual analysis on why those things happen. So let's actually rebut those points to show you why Monica wins over them. First of all, we think that OG just assumes that regional development is the important thing. We think that even if you don't care about winning specifically, you care about the fact that it's related to your culture, to the history of your family. All of those things are not directly connected to regional development. And we don't think that the way of showing was specifically this mechanism is the most important aspects in any fan's life. Second of all, we've told you that actually regional development is a thing that they are likely to do because it is cheaper to create good teams. If you're spending money or time when you are young, you can actually sell them to other places, which means that even like the best case of OO still happens more on our side. But what did we tell you more than that? OO told you that they only care about money. We think that first of all, those things are not comparative. Every owner probably cares about money. What is comparative in this debate? If you spend 95% of your money on your club, you probably care on the money or on making money much more because all of your money is spent there. You probably care less about making money when it's only a slight percentage of your money. So we think that comparatively, probably the Saudis care less about making money than that. Also, we've told you that probably the Saudis do this not because of money, but because they want to project that they have like a cosmopolitan identity in all of those stuff. Before I move on, I will take OO. Yes.
Right, so your analysis relies upon the idea that the only thing that the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia cares about now is weaponizing this football club to like assuage their identity, which is how you get all the benefits. But given that it's an investment fund,
thank you. We don't think that our analysis lies on our premise. We've analyzed why it is true, so it's not a premise, but also analysis also works in the other way, because even if they only care about money, we've told you that the best way to make new fans is to make your fan base bigger. And the best way to get new fans is not to have a bad media coverage of all of your fans are handing you. So probably they are going to involve the fans in their decision. Probably they will want to create the fans to like them, to tell about their friends that good things are happening and get more fans. So all of those things to actually pleasure your fans are happening even if they only care about money. But then let's make the comparison within those things, because even if we just show you that it is good, but even if you don't buy it at all, we think that even though always told us that in the vast majority of cases, probably the buy will go either way. What does that mean? That means that the way of slightly slowly growing your fans is not going to work if your fans does not support you and hate you from the get-go. The only way to grow in that sense is to do different things that are going to create new fans, which means taking away the rights of many of the fans that do right now, not having the regional development, not having their best interest, because you are completely changing. This happens much more when you are against the buy than when you support a guy that actually works with them to create a better club. From all of those reasons, please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. We'll now have the op whip up to conclude the debate. Here.
Okay, can you hear me, Rob? Yeah, so well? Okay. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. What we tell you, OO tells you, this is really important to people's identity. What Milos tells you at the beginning of the speech, completely disregarded by them, is that when you see something as so important part of your identity, you view that institution as independent moral actor in itself. When Nazis invaded Serbia, my great-grandparent wouldn't want Serbian Orthodox Church to be involved and to collaborate with the Nazis, even if that would save many lives, even if that would help churches not being brought down, even if it would enhance interest of our nation and of believers of Serbian Orthodox Church. But because my great-grandpa view my church as a moral actor, and with that regard as an extension, okay, of himself and of how he perceives morality, because it is so important part of who he is as a person. This church is what he is, as well as Newcastle is what Newcastle fans are. This is how you view this. On us not proving, as CG claims, that this is somehow going to harm your identity because the club is going to work in the interest of the fans. We agree, okay? Club is going to be lavish things, invest loads of money, save the players, whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that the identity of my club is going to be stained with what Milos tells you in his speech that Ido disregards and doesn't hear us say, which is you will be associated with Jamal Khashoggi's body being decimated in the embassy in Istanbul, with hundreds of thousands of children in Yemen dying of malnutrition, with fossil fuel industry that is destroying our planet and will kill it for generations to come. And as the country that has worst image in the world, you know how people look at Saudi Arabia Arabia, they view it as if some bunch of people in the desert found black gold and then associated themselves with most extreme branch of Wahhabi Islam and created one of the richer states in the world because of that. This is what my identity is being linked with. So I, as a believer of Serbian Orthodox Church, would never want money from Saudi Arabia, even if this would enhance interest of my church, and even though we will build many more churches, get more believers, get people to like us, I don't want to be associated with that specifically evil agent. We're speaking about one of the most evil agents that exist in the world today, very distinct from other billionaires like Roman Abramovich or fucking Thai retailers, whoever is the owner of the other club. I forgot. Saudi Arabia has very distinct population, especially in the environment where you have anti-Muslim narratives all across Europe. So even if they do everything in the interest of the fans and they want to preserve that identity, the very fact that you have been stained by that evil money is going to haunt you till the rest is going to haunt you till the rest of the living days. That being said, we give you two distinct new impacts that weren't existed in all that win us this debate. One is what brings you happiness. Happiness is about expectations, as Milos tells you, no response by ego. What does this mean? In Serbia, if I study law, I want to work in a law firm that's going to pay me $2,000 a month in the next 5 years and to do some relatively interesting cases. Whereas if you're a lawyer in New York who went to Eton and then Harvard, you want to work at the fucking top law firm in the world. So this guy from Eton is going to be much more sad than I am if he makes still triple the money that I do and in a much more fancy company, because his expectations are much higher than mine. This is why this year, and this is crucial comparative, this year Real Madrid fans were some of the saddest fans in the world because they finished second in the league, okay, and they lost in the quarters of Champions League. Even though they were among top 10 most successful clubs in the world, their fans are much more sad than fans from Albacete who took one win over Barcelona in Copa del Rey and managed to win some interesting games, because the expectations of fans of Albacete were much lower, and this is how people in general psychologically look at happiness. So when Milos still gives you reasons why in next 10 years, and Monica concedes they're not going to be that successful, every loss is a million times more painful, and every win is worth much less than it is now when we have some preservations, when we have some preservations about identity. Second thing that Milos tells you, when something is so important in your identity, what is important is that other people around you reaffirm that identity, that they like you, they think that you represent something right. And this is especially important regarding fans and their inner culture, inner community. As Milos tells you, for next 15 years, and stadiums you're going to hear Arab money. Okay, nobody of fans wants to hear them. This is where emotionally these people are getting struck with, because everyone is going to make fun of them for the next 15 and 20 years, and nobody's going to reaffirm that identity, which is essential if something is really important part of yourself. In fact, it's going to be extremely negative connotations regarding that identity. I'll take CG's son. These are two very distinct. Parts that are important regarding happiness. CG, do you have POI?
Yes, I would love even 20% of the population to know if Saudi Arabia is worse than Qatar, the Americans, or pronounce the murder journalist's name, but most people don't care. And we've given you analysis to why the core part of the club's identity, like being a coal miner's town or something, is not going to change for the worse, and actually going to change for the better.
Thank you. First of all, I think this is just a bullshit. Everyone knows that Saudi Arabia is one of the least popular countries in the world. Everyone knows that Khalif is all over the fucking news, okay? It's a bullshit rebuttal that you're giving. It's just factually incorrect. But secondly, it doesn't matter. Identity, my friend, is not what they do with physical stadium. Identity is what psychologically you think that your clubs represent. And now it represents Mohammed bin Salman whitewashing his murderous ass over buying a club that has already previous reputation. I, as a fan, have no business in being associated with such evil deeds. I agree they want to lavish and they want to show their family prestige. And this is exactly what I don't want to be associated with, even at the cost of losing games. With that being said, CG really doesn't have any benefit, okay? Developing youth projects, not comparative. Every analysis is whoever the fucking owner is. Okay, new fans. I don't want new fans. Okay, do you know why? Because when clubs have many good fans, other fans associate that with bandwagon fans. So everyone is going to think that I am not legit fan, but bandwagon fans who came in only because we have now we have Arab money with them. Next. next thing that CG says, oh, but they're going to buy anyway, so now if we as a club disassociate, we're going to have some harms. Note that we and OP don't say, oh, we publicly need to dissociate with them. We just normatively oppose this acquisition by fucking sovereign fund, okay? So this argument is pretty, this argument is pretty much out of the debate. Then they say, oh, but this is going to be only about supporting the narrative. Yes, exactly, this is going to be only about supporting the narrative. If we tell you that you finding happiness, okay, through the narrative, look at my and Milos analysis, what this narrative is going to look like. It's going to be extremely damaging to preservations of the club. At the end of the day, we agree with almost everything that government says, but we still win this debate because we show you how human psychology works, and we show you how humans in general perceive morality. Rarely have I been so proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for the speech. Thank you everyone for the debate. Remember to come across the floor and shake hands, or hardy virtual high five will have to suffice. I invite all speakers to now please leave the breakout room. Don't leave the Zoom, just the breakout room, and we'll call you back in about 15, 20 minutes or so. Thank you, everyone.